Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvarei. Okay, good morning, chevra. Thank you so much for joining us as we jump back in, morning, and continue our journey through Likutei Moharan, Torah Chof Gimmel. This morning's shir is kindly sponsored by Avi Ravinsky in the commemoration of the Shloshim and Le'ila Nishmas, his mother Ester Bas Feivel Moshe Levi. The Neshama should have an aliyah. One of the chevra has been following the shirim. And by Eli Hodari in the zechut of Chava Chaya Bas Ester Etya to go mechayil chayil Mazel on his engagement. Mazel Tov, also sponsored by Zev Klein Eli Nishmas, his parents Rivka Bryndel Bas Simcha and Ya'akov and Yeshayihu, and sponsored anonymously Eli Nishmas Nathaniel ben Reuven and Yehuda Leib ben Shmuel. The Neshama should have in Aliyah, Be'ezus Hashem. Actually, before we jump back in, or let's give a little bit of an of a review for a second. Then I want to read you something one of the chevra wrote on the discussion group, which I thought was tremendous. We were speaking yesterday as a continuation of what we began last week, speaking about Parnassah and about how there are really two different ways that Jews can engage with Parnassah. There's a way of anpin hirin and a way of anpin chashuchin. There's a way of a bright, shining face and a way, chas v'shalom, of a darkened, blackened face, the aspect of mara shchayra, of sadness, vis-a-vis joy. And it really depends, like we said yesterday, on what a person's life perspective is, like how a person is in this world, which relates to a person's, first principle concepts on what life is all about in the first place, right? And then Parnassah will fit in one way or another into that scheme. And that a person who is living for this world, a person who has forgotten those childlike ideals, that vision of like a glimmer of a memory of what the neshama was before it came down into a guf, like the realization that there's more to life than just this world alone. Like children, we always say, have simple faith. I think there was a study actually out of Cambridge or one of the universities, you can look it up, where they found that children, even without any social conditioning, naturally believe in God. They naturally believe that the world is created, even if they didn't pick that up from home or school. They took children who had no exposure to religious concepts. There's a natural, intuitive feeling that there's more to this world than meets the eye, right? Because it's a very logical thing. Things came from somewhere. This world must have come from somewhere. And children have that, and adults sort of lose that in one way or another. But if a person still has that childlike sense for the depth in this world, then their Parnassah pursuits are part of that, and they don't take over, right? They're seen as a means to the ultimate end and not the end in and of itself. And Mamela, a person doesn't hinge their whole mental health and well-being on that particular nakuda. Like the rest of the Hasidim we said before, many of them were not well-to-do at all, and they struggled, and they had challenges in Parnassah, but you would never know it, right? You would know it maybe by looking at the way that they lived physically, but not at the way that they lived emotionally or spiritually, because they didn't hinge their whole well-being on this, because that wasn't the ikr. Parnassah was a means toward the end. There are other ways to get to the end. You don't need that particular means, and as much as a person needs it, they work toward it, and they try their best to have it, but they didn't hinge their whole sense of self on it. The chevra who do oftentimes experience the inyan of Parnassah in the way of Adam and Chava after the chet, be'itzaving techalno, with a lot of sadness, and a lot of brokenness and urgency and anxiety and stress, and it's very dark. And the experience is one of escape. The experience is a disconnection from Hashem, as opposed to masumatan be'emunah, right? Doing business with Emunah, right? In the context of our Emunah in Hashem, and not just doing business faithfully, like we said, but to do masumatan in the context of Emunah. That's what we had been learning about in the previous days. We said, how does a person get there? It's very important for a person to be working on Shmiras HaBris. That if a person is working on Shmiras HaBris, we said then they have Bris Melach Olam. We went into yesterday. A person has the covenant of salt. And salt, we said, is a preservative. Salt means that they're holding on still to their youthful elements. The Nekuda Toiva Sheyeshba by Adayin, right? That point that they still have inside of them, that they haven't lost. And they're able to live life in a simple way. They're able to live life in a way, speaking about books, the story of our lives, where we speak about the princess and the princess of youth and what it means to have that and to guard that and to hold that. That's what it is. Shomer HaBris is Shomer Bris Melach Olam, that eternal covenant of, like we said, of salt. And then a person is able to live in Meir La'atzmai Or Pnei Melachayim. They're able to live in a good world. They're able to live in the presence of the living God. And they perceive all of life to be an experience of Hashem, direct experience and encounter with Hashem. And then when they have Melach, so then Mammon Chaser. Then the Taivas Mammon goes away when they're holding on to the Bris Melach. That was basically everything that we learned in the past couple of shiurim, with different details and psukim and sources thrown in. I just want to read to you a message that one of the chevra wrote yesterday, on yesterday's shiur, and I think he had a lot of insights that are additional. Everybody's encouraged, by the way, to join the discussion group. It's a really beautiful group, and some really key figures have emerged to our sharing. It's just a great place. It's a great place to be with the chevra who are taking this journey with us. There's one for men, less active one for women. Hopefully it will be more active. And he writes like this. He says, salt. The first thing I thought of when I heard salt is that salt preserves. There are people that have a condition where they remember everything that ever happened to them at every interaction. Most of them are severely depressed unless they can somehow compartmentalize. So that means preserving, right, or salt in itself can be good or bad. Salt also magnifies the existing taste in foods. Salt itself is salty, but if you sprinkle it on food in the right proportion, it makes it taste better. Right? Not because salt itself tastes good, but it enhances flavor in a way that works. Too much or too little, and again, it has a negative effect. So that means salt itself can lead us to the panim of Kedusha by not only preserving our good essence and our good memories, but it can even increase the goodness and magnify it. So that was an element that we didn't mention yesterday. Salt not only preserves, it magnifies, right? Whatever taste is there, sprinkle a little salt and it can bring out the taste. Even though if you think of it, salt itself is very bitter. Nobody likes to eat salt itself. It's disgusting. When you sprinkle it on food, it draws out those good elements. So he writes over here that Tzaddik can also do this. Because he said that Tzaddik is called Bris Melach Olam. Right? That is the Tzaddik. He can help us preserve ourselves and our essence. But once we have preserved and persevered through the withdrawal of Pagama Bris, which we spoke about yesterday, for example, it can then enhance being with your wife, right? To be close and connected and magnify the feeling to a level it was meant to be. So relating this to Bris, he says the concept of Pagama Bris is important. Life is hard, right? People have preserved difficult memories. Those memories have become enhanced over the years, right? With a negative salt. Saying there could be a negative salt. So you have to know, right? Because zelu umazeh, to the extent that a person doesn't have the bris melach olam, there will be another kind of melach, right? Which will be to preserve negative memories and to magnify negative emotions. That was something we didn't mention yesterday. Right? And each time something happens in our life or during the day, it takes the preserved memories of the bad and it magnifies them. And basically, we see life through the lens, right, of those negative things that happen to us. A person's stuck in trauma, that's how they see the world. They're already in fight or flight mode. They can't flow and see the world with new eyes, fresh eyes. They're always pessimistic. They're always fearful. The same thing that happened to them then is going to happen to them now. This is a worry that they have. Right, and magma, a person is built to notice the negative. That's why our brain works in order to survive. That's why it's so difficult to stop. On a chemical level, we want a dopamine hit. We need more and more and worse things to keep the novelty alive. It's something that can't be enhanced anymore without more and more salt. Right? Because that's the salt in a negative way. At that point, we think the salt still tastes good. At the point, the salt is preserving our sanity. Even if it is terrible for your blood pressure in your relationship, for your marriage, for your soul, we still need it because it's protecting us from the trauma we preserved and magnified from our childhood. See, he says, is there a flip side? Yes. We need to work backward. The first step above was preservation and then magnification in a side of Kedusha, right? To preserve the good memories, to preserve the holiness that we have, and to bring out that holy taste, so to speak. But we have over-magnified and over-salted, right? Because it's the zeluma says the contrast way past what is pleasurable, yet now we feel like, everything should taste like over-salted herring. Like you put way too much salt in things. There are people like that. Like before they even taste the food, they just dump salt in it. Right? It's like way too much. We need to tell the chef to stop salting the food. We can live without the salt now. We need to detox. It's very deep what he's saying, because it's all connected, right? Once a person starts to salt, then they think that they need salt, and they need lots of salt in order to survive. But we need to bring ourselves down from needing peak experiences to be able just to handle life itself. The addict cannot enjoy the simple pleasures because the addict has so jacked up the dopamine levels that the simple pleasures of life are not accessible anymore. They're not pleasurable, right? In order to feel something, he needs to feel a needle in his, in his vein and just shoo, a jab of heroin or cocaine or, something that the user needs to have. And Pekama Bris is no different. It's just a different brain. It just goes through the eyes and it's, explodes in the brain, right? Up and up and up and up and up, peak experiences. And that's too much salt. So he says, we can live without the salt now. We need to detox. After a while, we start tasting our food again, right? Because otherwise, we weren't tasting the food b'chlal. We were tasting salt. We forgot how the food actually tastes. We start remembering that we had other memories stored. We like to paint. We like to ride our bike. We like to read books. The sun is brighter. The colors are more vibrant. Our families are no longer a burden, but a priority. We start creating and preserving new memories. We want our brain to get the dopamine from life, from the good. We now see the good in everything. When we add the salt now, it makes those things taste even better. But what about money? What happens when you're at the end of Pekama Bris? The other process, right? Addictions need salt. Your brain needs more dopamine, so it pivots to money. That's what we said, right? The addiction, the illness progresses. Chas v'shalom. You work more and harder, tell yourself it's for the best. I need this to support my family. You forget where it really came from, that it doesn't really bring you happiness. It is like salt itself. A tool, when used properly, can bring joy. But if you're overworking and you're giving it to tzedakah, it may remind you that you probably never needed that much. The tzedakah is not just what you give away. Working less is tzedakah as well. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This relates a little bit to what I said in a previous shir. I'm not sure if I said it after shir or in shir. I think I did, right? When it comes to sacrificing for a more meaningful job, getting paid less, sometimes dramatically less, it's not getting paid less. It's, let's say you're making the same original salary, but you're taking off that amount of the salary and you're paying for what it would mean to have a meaningful job, right? So this is what he said. Let's just read that again because it's so powerful. Mamish, this Yid wrote a whole kuntras over here, but it's, so somebody responded. He says, this is what voice notes are for. No, but he wrote it out. It's so beautiful. And it's better than a voice note because you can mamish read it. Right? So let's just read that bit again because it's mamish amazing. Right? The tzedakah is not just what you give away. Working less can be tzedakah as well. Who are you giving it to? Your family, your kids, your wife, yourself. Give yourself the tzedakah. Preserve your life. Add the money as needed for something special, but like with salt, too much and you can't taste it anymore. You need more and more because you feel nothing when you get it now. It's the same thing as Pekama Bris, he's saying. Right? So you pull back. You realize in order to feel anything, you need to hide it away in order to feel anything. If you're lucky, that's all it is. If you're not, and you can't figure out how to get more because it really comes from Hashem, you start to gamble. Right? You start to chase the high until you lose everything, or you start to steal, right? Which ties into Mazel Matan Be'emunah in the literal level. If a person is not doing Mazel Matan Be'emunah, so then the literal definition of Mazel Matan Be'emunah goes out the window because all of a sudden you feel that in order to make an extra buck, there's nothing that a person won't stop at. You start to steal from your boss, your family, your kids. Perhaps you shoplift. Eventually you lose it all again because you're not smart or careful as you thought and you get caught. The same can happen for any process addiction, video games, our phones. Oh my gosh, it's all interconnected. The Tzaddik is here to remind us and inspire us to try and wind back the good we think we need from the world, to work backward and preserve what's really good. Then we can use the salt to add spice to the beautiful things in life so that we don't live life just waiting for, Mashiach, for Olam Haba, for death. Mashiach is now, Olam Haba is now, and death can also be living. Bad things will always happen in life. The panim of the Yetzer Hara will take those things and pour salt in it, and it will be painful and will preserve that memory and enhance it. We need the Tzaddik's words to pull us back and remind us, not only is this world not real, it's also filled with beauty. We just need to preserve both, the good and the bad, and enhance the good and hold the salt for the painful, difficult things. Learn the Tzaddik's teachings to remember that those bad things are sweet too, not for this world, but for the next. Is that unbelievable? I wonder how long it took him to, can you imagine? It's incredible. And this is what the Rebbe wanted. Like I said, we're trying to learn. Okay, I'm giving a little interpretation. But we're learning the words. Once a person starts, Edgar's amazing at this, the brain goes off and boom, 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 Jeremy, the Yidden, like, there's so much depth, there's so much to, to really mull these things over, to think about them during the day, say worrying the day, during the day, throughout the day.
We're on our way.
Yeah?
What's that? The doors ringing.
Oh, okay, maybe somebody wants to let him in. Okay.
That was like a
incredible.
Day,
changes the whole.
I feel like you're reading like a modern day diary entry of Tzaddik Zeros. I'm not joking. Like,
wow, like vulnerable and real.
Exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Wonderful message. Incredible message. Okay, good. Let's go weiter. So here we are. Go to the top of page Lamed Hey, and we are holding with the word vizeh. Vizeh. Kishabiksha Rachav Simana Dechaya. When Yeshua sent Meraglim into Eretz Yisrael prior to Yeshua leading the nation in, and the spies were sort of sheltered in the house of Rachav Azayna. And she, in exchange for guarding them, wanted a guarantee from them that when they come in, they would leave her family and all of her relatives alive. So she wanted a simon. She said, give me a sign that I can prove to remember this. So Biksha Rachav Simna Dechaya, when Rachav requested this sign of life, Kamaisha Kasav, the pasuk says, "V'achigisem is avi v'imi." Right? She said, "And you'll keep myself and my family, my father and mother alive." Amra unesatem li ois emes. She said, "Give me a true sign." Why does she say a true sign? Because what she's asking for a sign that she shall live. Right? She'll be preserved. She'll be kept alive, and that's chayim. And chayim, we said, chayim is connected to emes. Ar pnei melech chayim. The light of the living God is connected to Emunah, right? And Emunah and emes are connected. Like we said, just move right over to the other column, right over there, on top of the column. Ki emes hu b'chinas chayim. That's why she said, give me a true sign of life. V'amrullah, and they said to her, as tikvas chut hashani tikshri lach. Here is this red string, and this is the tikvas chut, like the cord of this string. Tikshri lach, we will tie it for you as a sign. Says the Rebbe, tikvas b'chinas emunah, because she was asking for a sign of truth, and they are giving her a sign of truth. Just she used the word emes, and they use the word emunah, but it's the same thing, because emunah means to be plugged in to emes, simple as it is, which means to be plugged into the true essence of life, to the ilana dechaya, right, to that tree of life that sits at the core of reality, which is Hashem, which is Emunah. How do we know that tikva is an aspect of Emunah? Kamashakasav, the pasuk says, "V'yesh tikva acharisech." There will be a hope for you in the end, as the pasuk in Yirmiyahu says. Highly encouraged, by the way, during these 3 weeks to read Yirmiyahu. You can read Yirmiyahu just in the English. Read a little bit, maybe a chapter a day or something like that. It's quite lengthy, but if you've not read Yirmiyahu, highly encouraged. Again, not to study it, take the art scroll and just read it in English. It's incredible sefer. The yesh tikva acharisech. So it says over there will be hope for you at the end. The Emunah hi achar sayamim. Says the Rebbe, the end of days is Emunah. That's what we're going to be working on. The end of days, it's all about Emunah. Rebbe Nachman famously said that the war of Gog and Magog is not a physical war. It's a war of Emunah. The war of Gog and Magog is an internal battle where there's so many millions of reasons to give up hope, and there are so many Jews who have fallen by the wayside, corpses, spiritually speaking, and those few, who are holding tight, they're the ones who are menatzeach, and they're going to bring the whole world back to Hashem. Emunah. The Emunah hi achar hayamim. The Emunah hi achar hayamim. The end of days is just going to be Emunah. Ki aleh imdim kalamidas, because Emunah, like we learned in Torah Aleph, is connected to the sphere of Malchus. Malchus is the Levana, the les lamigarmi klum. That's what Emunah means, is the realization that everything is just gufim. All the malachim, all the people making big decisions, leiv malachim asar biyad Hashem. Trump and this prime minister and that president is nothing without HaKodesh Baruch Hu's using them like pawns, right? But HaKodesh Baruch Hu is the melech malchei hamlachim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the emes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the truth. And in relation to Hashem, all of us are the bechina of the moon, waiting for some light from the sun. Meaning, what's the light? Activating energy, right? We're looking for that from everywhere else because we don't have it, because everything down here in this world is just malchus, is just nothing. The less lamegame klum, it has nothing of its own. And in the end of days, all there is malchus. That's what it means, that at the end came Chabakuk, Chabad Breslov Chabakuk, also Chabakuk, the Nabi Chabakuk, and what did he say? At the end there's only one thing. It's Tzaddik ve'emunah yichya. It's all about Emunah. At the end of the day, it is all about Emunah, and that's the final thing. When you distill Yiddishkeit down to one nekuda, what is it that we need to work on? Emunah. That's it. If we, I think there's a company called Deep Mind, right? If I'm not mistaken, Deep Mind. Yeah, it's one of the early AI companies, and they have as their slogan, their slogan is, first solve intelligence, then solve everything else. Right? So their thing is, everybody's busy working on millions of different problems in the world. First solve intelligence. Like if we can get to AGI, to artificial general intelligence, to super intelligence, we'll solve every other problem. But the main problem at the core, so we don't have enough intelligence. That's why Nebuch people are dying from cancer. We can't figure out how to stop it. That's why, this problem and that problem, economic difficulties and disputes and arguments, and first solve intelligence, then solve everything else. Rebbe Nachman says, no. First solve Emunah, then solve everything else. If we solved Emunah, we would solve everything. Everything. We wouldn't need any other issues, because everything, even the things I'm talking about, not just within our communities and within socio religious terminology with regard to the world, it's true. But we believe that even the physical world mirrors our spiritual state. If we were the way that we needed to be, there wouldn't be cancer. Cancer is a physical representation, manifestation of ills, right? That we have inside of our inner world. That's right. I think the Maggid Mezritch said a small hole in the body is a big hole in the soul. These things mirror each other. And again, it's not so proper or even accurate to say that about an individual person, like, oh, this person is suffering from an illness, that must be why. We're talking in general terms. We don't know about individual people. We're all one. So different people pick up different people's baggage, or we're all sharing the burden collectively. But if we collectively, as a humanity, were solved emotionally, there would be no aberrations in nature. We would have no climate change and terrible tidal waves and huge hurricanes and tornadoes and things and earthquakes. Everything would calm down. Everything would be the way that it's supposed to be. Like it says by Anshe Sedaim, all the animals were acting strange because the human beings, messed up the whole world. But first solve Emunah, then solve everything else. Says the Rebbe, this is what it means. Chabakuk is giving the nation this kind of perspective that really what needs to be solved is Emunah. So he says, Chabakuk, he says, what are you guys focusing on other things? There's only one thing to focus on, Emunah. If we solved that, everything else is solved. So for example, you don't need to solve Midos. You don't need to solve it. You need to solve Emunah. If Emunah was solved, Midos would be solved. You don't need to solve Shalom Bayis. If Emunah was solved, Shalom Bayis would be solved. You don't need to solve millions of different things. If we solved Emunah, everything else falls into place on its own naturally. That's what needs to be focused on. And a lot of times, because we live in a lower consciousness, so we look at different manifestations of an issue, and then we immediately try to, I want to deal with this issue. That's not the issue, that's a symptom. I want to deal with that issue. That's not an issue, that's a symptom. Shmir Sabris, the issue of our generation, not an issue, it's a symptom. All of these things, symptoms. Right? Chabakuk came and said at the end, Klal Yisrael will wake up and they're going to understand this simple principle. There are no issues. There's one issue. There are many, many symptoms, but there's one issue. The princess is lost. The princess is Emunah. The princess is childlike simplicity, innocence, humility, authenticity, vulnerability, gone. The princess is lost. When we bring the princess back, right? Because remember in the story of the lost princess, like I write in the book, The Story of Our Lives, so the king has 7 children, right? 6 sons and 1 daughter. And the 6 sons, of course, is the 6 days of the week. And the 1 daughter, of course, is Shabbos Kodesh. Shabbos is Emunah. Shabbos is the ability to rest from all of our work during the 6 days of the week, to remember what's true, to remember where our Parnassah comes from, to remember that be'emes, even when I thought I was working, it was all HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was all Him all along. And that princess of Shabbos Kodesh in the story gets lost. And all we're left with is just we have all of the other stuff, but the essence is gone. And so naturally, can you imagine if the essence, like if you have a car, but and everything works, but there's no engine in it, or like the wheels are missing. So everything else is beautiful, but the thing is missing. The thing is missing. I just want to read you a poem. I know I'm doing a lot of reading from my phone, but this point, it's the most important point. So I just want to read you something. Some of you may have heard this from me in the past. It is a poem that I had. Oh, you know what? I don't have to hear my phone. Can you pass me from my heart to yours?
Much better to read from the...
Yeah, on the left-hand side. It's printed at the end. I think it might be even the last poem. This is a humble book that I've written. The second volume is coming out. Be'ezer Hashem. It's in editing. I just want to read you this poem. And I think this poem, Mamish, it cuts to the core, and it's also related to the 3 weeks, and so just read it now if it came to my head. Listen to this, because this is Mamish. I think it captures the whole thing. It's called Vision at Ne'ilah. And it says, broken ego, broken time, broken space, right? Olam Shana Nefesh. Broken Tzaddikim, which is the expression of Nefesh, broken Shabbos, which is the expression of holiness and time, and broken temple, the expression of holiness and space. More acute, broken Kohen Gadol, broken Yom Kippur, broken Kodesh HaKodashim. We can never stop mourning that which we never truly lost. Right, like Ya'akov Avinu with Yosef, right? He couldn't stop because Yosef was still alive. The end of the destruction, the beginning of the rebuilding. A 2,000-year process of pain and prosperity, mortar, mixing, bricklaying, interior designing, work-related injuries, freak accidents, casualties. Menorah made out of blown-out candles. Mizbeach made out of 6 million sacrifices. Building the spiritual structure of the third temple, everlasting in its glory. Look up. The gleaming edifice towers above you. Look around. Mighty walls of Torah thought, tear-soaked prayer, crystallized, shining. Have we not completed our task? The scaffolding has been removed, the building is built. The grandeur is blinding. And so, lifted on wings of ecstasy, I escaped to an ancient vision. Yom Kippur in the temple rebuilt to behold the visage of the Kohen Gadol, Mara Kohen. I rushed through the giant ornate doors into the expanse where heaven meets earth, past the vessels of gold and the platform of the Levium, tuning their instruments once again. I approach the Holy of Holies, legs carried by joy and excitement, and I freeze. There is no Kodesh HaKodashim. In its place, a gaping hole. Concrete slabs, unsightly insulation, a tangle of wood and metal, silent, empty space. A sound. I start, frightened. Ringing bells from around the corner. Ah, the Kohen Gadol. I peek around the corner, and there in the air float the Shemona Begadim, the holy garments. A brilliant light emanates from the Choshen stones, and the shining tzitz is positioned above. Bells and pomegranates ring out below, but there is no Kohen Gadol. The garments, they flutter, devoid of essence. I am shaken from my inner wanderings as Yom Kippur draws to a close. A joyous Kaddish, table set with orange juice and rugelach, and many breaths of relief. Marav ensues. Newly forgiven, I bang my chest twice during Slach Lona because somehow Yom Kippur, Shabboson, is yet incomplete. The Beis HaMikdash of our Judaism is all but rebuilt. Wonderfully consummate in so many ways, but our generation, the stone despised by the builders, is tasked with generating the Kodesh HaKodashim. All songs are holy. The Song of Songs is holy of holiest. The holy has thankfully been built. Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim, yeshivas, shuls, gemachim, galore. The Beis Hamikdash of Jewish society stands before us remarkably impressive. But our generation's task is the holy of holiest. But our generation's task is the holy of holiest. A nation prepared to fill the structures of the holy with the essential spirit of Shir HaShirim. Passion, desire, romance. Cutting to the depth of our tradition and bringing it to everlasting life. Until then, we remain with tzaddikim who do not connect the earthiness of my life with the portion of heaven I carry within. A Shabbos robbed of spiritual freedom, nachla bimitzarim. And a spiritual temple that despite all external appearances is broken, terribly broken. And the mourning continues. Right? This is what it means when you solved everything else, but you didn't solve for Emunah, right? When you have all, like, we're working on this, we're working on that, but the essence of what the whole purpose is, what everything is for, that somehow, we have the Beis Hamikdash, Kodesh HaKodashim is gone. Like, there's no Kodesh HaKodashim. We have the Shemona Begadim, but we don't have a Kohen Gadol. So now we have to solve for Emunah. Now we have to solve for the core of the core of the core. And that's what the Rebbe, I think, is saying over here. This is what it is.
At the core is giving a yid another hug.
Yeah.
And the core, at the core is
that's right, that's right.
It's that little child playing the flute.
Bidyuk. The simplicity. And that's why the Kruvim were Keruvia, right? At faces of children. Yeah.
Facing one another.
Facing one another. Panim b'panim. Like, the Shir HaShirim, Kodesh HaKodashim.
That's it. It's not the Emunah, not Tzaddik be'Emunah Yechia, be'Emunah so. It's almost dependent on something else. It's either on
who?
him, or on him, or maybe it's on the Kruvim.
Right.
Yeah,
Of Emunah so. Right.
Concept of Emunah.
It's relationship.
It has to be Emunah through the lens of relationship.
Yeah.
Panim b'panim, beautiful.
Maybe
It doesn't say tzaddik be'emunah yichya. It has tzaddik, because you could have emunah and still not have a relationship. Tzaddik be'emunah soy. Beautiful.
Without the
Nachon. Meaning the chayis is a result of the emunah soy.
Wow.
You could have emunah, but it's dead. A person has an intellectual belief in some first cause. You believe that the world came from somewhere. There's no chiyus there. The living comes from the relational aspect. Beautiful. Like I told you guys. Exhibit A. Huh? Because you cannot get to Emunah and Hashem without the tzaddik. So my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Shmelka Selisher, it was not a chassid, it wasn't a misnagid, he was very close with the Divrei Chaim of Sanz and others. Actually, my father has a letter that my grandfather wrote supporting the Divrei Chaim of Sanz. He was a great goy and gadol, and there was some controversy, and he came to his defense. Like, we have a public letter from Shmelka Selisher. So he writes, or it's said in his name, that once he was teaching this to his students, and he said people read this Gemara wrong. He said what Habakkuk was actually saying is not ba Habakkuk ve'amitan al achas v'tzadik be'emunasa yichya, like the main thing is emunah. He said ba Habakkuk ve'amitan al achas. You know what the one thing Habakkuk summed the whole Yiddishkeit down to is tzaddik. Is the tzaddik. Be'emunasai, when we believe in the tzaddik, and yichya.
So you have two emunas.
It's a double and it's
and
both.
Tzaddik is exactly double the gematria
Of
emunah plus emunah.
tzaddik is double the gematria
Of emunah.
of emunah.
So emunah plus emunah equals tzaddik. 102 plus 102 is 204.
There you go. Unbelievable.
Come on, that's
Vayaminu b'Hashem
Uva Moshe.
relational
u'v'Moshe.
Emunah. Wow.
Unbelievable. That's what the tzaddik avails us. Two kinds of tzaddik. Unbelievable. Okay, so this is what we're learning over here. This is our generation. We have to work on these things. Emunah and the tzaddik. Tzaddik and emunah k'meshikosa v'chabakak ve'amidan al achas v'chulu. Zechut hashani. So that was the yesh tikva la'acharisech. It was a reference to emunah. Right? And that's why they said, as tikvas chut hashani. What's chut hashani? Chut hashani is a bechina zrichas arapanim. when a person is connected to tikva zechut hashani, that tikva is yesh tikva la'acharisech, acharisech is bachabakak b'midin al achas, that it's all about emunah, solve for emunah, and you solve everything else. So then you have chut hashani, which is an aspect of the shining, what's called the or hapanim, where the face of the world and our own faces are shining. Because the pasuk says, "Vatikra shmai zarach." Zarach, right? They called his name Zarach, and what did they do? Because they tied a string on his hand, right? And they said, this one is called Zarach, Yachoshech Yichase Eretz V'alayich Yizrach Hashem. Darkness will cover the earth, but upon you, Yizrach Hashem. Hashem's light will shine. And that's the chut, that's like a ray, right? Chut hashani. This is the ray of the arapanim. That's a result of yesh tikva la'acharisech as tikva chut hashani, which is the emunah that we're able to get as a result of our connection with the tzaddik, who brings the salt, that holy salt is able to help us preserve the good memories, is able to help us draw out the goodness of life without over-salting our food, like we read in the beginning of this year. Because darkness is the aspect of depression and sadness, daigas with taivas parnassah, the worry and the taiva for parnassah, tsar keflayim ki aleda, like we said, is a doubled over aspect of giving birth, like we said. You remember? Because we cry out 2 times, right? Kuf mem kalani miroshi kalani mizrai, and that was the kuf mem double ayin, because 70 was the aspect of the nations of the world, and it's the avodah zara mamish of the collective avodah zara of all the nations of the world. Double that is 140, and that's the 2 times crying out kiflayim ki aleda, right? Crying out double the amount that a woman cries out, which is the ayin kolon, right? To 70 times, so double that is 140. Anpin chashuch avodah zara. So va'alayich yizrach Hashem. But in place of that even though hachoshech yichasa aretz, even though there's darkness, there's anpin chashuchin, Hashem says va'alayich yizrach Hashem. Hashem's light will illuminate that. That's emunah elokus. When we have emunah in Hashem, Hashem will be yizrach. That's arapanim. Va'alayich yizrach Hashem. Vayichan pnei ha'ir. Like we said about Ya'akov Avinu, vayichan pnei ha'ir. He rectified the city. Tikkun hamatbeah. Right? That's what one man Amar said. He fixed for them coins. Tikkun tavas mammon. And he fixed up tavas mammon. Bebechinas smach zvulun b'tzeisecha. Which is the aspect of smach zvulun. Right? When money is being used in a proper holy way, smach zvulun. It brings to joy. Right? When it's used in a holy endeavor. This is the aspect of the Gemara in Brachas, which says that there are 2 psukim about a wife, 2 psukim about a spouse. One says matzah isha matzah toiv. One says, right, you find a wife and find goodness, and the other says matzah ani mar mimavas esa isha, right, or there's some terminology like that. Right, yeah, Moitzani Mar Mimavas Esa Isha. Right, that I found of all the things that are bitter, I found a wife most bitter of all. Right, because Chas v'Shalom, it could be either. Either it could be Ezer Kenegdai, right, or it could just be Kenegdai. In which case it's really bitter. It's very difficult, and people could live in a difficult situation. I think it's not just the wife. I think it goes both ways. I think the same. 2 words can apply very much to husbands, in relation to their wives as well. But ultimately, there's matzah ay moitza. And this is how it is. When a person would get married, they would ask him these questions, right? Or which one is it? Is it working out? Is it matzah isha, matzah taiv? Or is it chas v'shalom moitza, which is not that way? So the Rebbe says, really, it's not speaking about a wife at all. Rather, it's speaking about Parnassah. Because a person's Parnassah, like you sometimes hear a person, they're married to their job, in terminology like that. Sometimes Parnassah could be like a person's spouse. How does the Rebbe know this? The Gemara in Sanhedrin Pei Aleph tells us, if somebody goes and steals somebody else's Parnassah, it's like he violated his wife. So you see from here, these 2 things are equated. A person's Parnassah and a person's spouse are connected, are related. Parnassah shuhu b'yitzavain. So says the Rebbe, it's not speaking about a marriage that isn't working out and the bitter nature of the spouse. No, it's speaking about Parnassah ba'anpin chashuchin. If a person does Parnassah out of touch with the Bris Melech Olam, out of touch with Emunah, out of touch with the Tzaddik and solving for Emunah, all he has is Yitzavin Bechinas Moitzani Marmi Maves Isha. All that's left is the bitterness of this world, the bitterness of Parnassah. Marmi Maves Isha. The aspect of needing to oversalt because of a lack of salt, which means that nothing tastes good anymore, and so they need to dump salt and buy and upgrade this and renovate that and pick up another car and go to this holiday and go here for Pesach and this place and it never stops and you never enjoy anything because it is always more and more. Like the story of the Chacham and the Tam, like I mentioned. The 9th story in Sipurei Maasiyos. Right, if the chevra haven't read it yet, another push, another encouragement. Go online to Sefaria, read the story of the Chacham and the Tam. Really important. You can do it today. Have a couple of minutes, 10, 15 minutes. Go online, the story of the Chacham and the Tam, the sophisticate and the simpleton. And you read about the Tam. You've read this story? You read about the Tam. Vis-a-vis the Chacham. And the Tam has nothing. There's a very famous bit over there where the Tam doesn't have anything. He just has stale bread. He doesn't have anything else. And again, he's not slacking off. He's working hard. And he sits there like a king at his little wooden table with nothing, and the roof is broken down, and the windows have no panes of glass in them. And he tells his wife, he says, I would really love some delicious blintzes. Some delicious blintzes, if you don't mind. And they have nothing. They have this one rotten, moldy piece of black bread. And she cuts him a piece of bread and she gives it to him. And he takes a bite. He says, oh, these are the most delicious blintzes I've ever had in my life. And Mom is just tasting that. And then he says, okay, I think I'm ready for the next course. If you don't mind bringing some, some eggplant parmesan, some other fancy food, and she cuts it. No, whatever he says. She cuts him another piece of bread and she serves it, and he eats it, and mamish, tasting all of the tastes. And this is how it goes, bit by bit by bit, with regard to drink. Bring me wine, bring me beer. She just has some dirty water. Every time he's drinking it, he mamish tastes it. The flip side is the Chacham actually has all these things, and everything is bitter for him. He doesn't taste anything. He's always upset. He needs more. He's never satisfied with anything he has. It's a vicious cycle, over-salting. He needs more salt. Because he's destroyed his sense of taste. So he constantly gets 1 degree. No, it's not enough. He needs another degree. This, but then maybe somewhere else in the world there's still someone who's a bigger expert than him. So he has to go on. And he's bitter. And then, the culmination of this story, I'm giving it all away, but you'll look it up. The culmination of the story is where the king hears about these interesting 2, childhood friends and how they have 2 very different pasts, and the king wants to meet them. So the king sends messengers to the both of them, to the Chacham and to the Tam. Knock at the door. The Tam, hears somebody knocking. He goes. And he opens the door. Oh my gosh, it's a royal messenger of the king. He says, the king would like to meet you. Come with us, put on your best clothing and come with us. Right away, he can't believe it. The king sent a messenger to see me. Quickly runs. He puts on, he puts on whatever he has, and he quickly runs. Meanwhile, messengers are knocking at the door of the Chacham, and he opens the door. He says, yeah. He said, we're here, messengers from the king. The king wants to meet you. He says, there's no king. So what do you mean? We're messengers of the king. He sent us here. He said, I don't believe there's a king. They said, okay. He said, you don't either believe there's a king. He said, did you ever see the king in person? They said, no, we never actually saw the king in person. He says, you see, the whole thing's a shtus. There's no king. And he philosophizes with them in the point. So he stays in his house. Meanwhile, the Tam goes to the king. The Tam gets promoted. This is the whole story, mamish, of the 2 ways. It's either matzah or moitza, but not as it relates to a spouse, as it relates to Parnassah. Because Moitzani Marmi Mavasase Isha, Parnassah could be the most bitter of things. Where did we learn about bitterness? Bechinas Mirirusa de Alma, the bitterness of the world. Shetzarach Lahamtika Aide Melach, that the only way to manage the bitterness of the world is to preserve, right? Is to have that sweetness. That's a result of the salt, right? That's salty, but it's able to draw out those flavors. It's able to preserve those good points. Like we said earlier, Mirirusa. Without that element of salt, you couldn't handle the bitterness of the world. So therefore, if a person has the bechina of Parnassah be'itzabain, then yes, moitzani marmi mavasas isha. It's bitter. It's more bitter than death. It's a bechina of ayin anpin chashuchin. The opposite of arpene melachayim is death. And even though it might be very, very, very shiny on an Mazel level, but like a person, again, who oversalts all the food, he can't taste any of it. Like this beautiful Yid wrote in this message. It's just the taste is dulled and dulled and dulled. But on the contrasting is Parnassah de Kedusha. A person is doing Parnassah mata be'emunah. That about that person siv matza isha, matza toiv. If you find an isha in the right way, Parnassah in the right way, then matza toiv. Oh, is it good to work? Oh, is it good? With what gratitude a person receives a paycheck. With what thanks to Hashem, whatever little bit that a person has, he's celebrated. It's the greatest thing in the world. A person puts in work. A person benefits from gaining. And Masamata Be'emunah, they did things in the right way. And it might not be the most, but they're happy with what they have and they adjust their lifestyle accordingly. They don't live beyond their means, etc. Toiv b'chinas tzadeh b'chinas bris melach. Shu mamtik mirirusa. Toiv is the aspect of the tzaddik. The aspect of the tzaddik, that goodness, which is the bris melach, like we said, that is the covenant of salt, she mamtik mirusa, because then the bitterness of matzah ani mar mi maves isha. If you have the melach, then matzah isha matzah toiv. Then all the bitterness is sweetened, and all you have is goodness in this world. You have simplicity in this world. You've solved emunah, you've solved everything else. Hanataivas v'itzavan parnassah. You don't have the bitterness of this endless rat race, endless pursuit. Of the ultimate worry and sadness of Parnassah, like we said, Misha Yesh Le'mana writes some Asayim. You have one, you want two. Ayiv Kesef, the pasuk says Le'yizbak Kesef. If a person loves the money and they don't love the things that you could potentially purchase with the money, you'll never have enough of it because there's always going to be endlessly more. And ultimately, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos said it first: Mar b'nechasim, Mar b'daiga. There's even a movement today among people who really could afford things called minimalism. There's a certain yeshiva of getting rid of things. My wife, for a living, does professional home organizing. Little pitch for her. That wasn't the intention, but a shameless plug on behalf of my wife. We need to make Parnassah also. And so she and her, what she does is she essentially goes into houses, some of them quite wealthy, wealthy homes, wealthy neighborhoods, and helps the people like take all the things that they don't need. Like there's so many things, and they leave the person maybe with less things, some of which we may have in our house now, which needs to be decluttered. I'm kidding. So what we need though is, and then it's gewalt. Like they have space, they could breathe. Like open a cabinet, it's like millions of things fall out. Everything has its space, and it's unbelievable. I think people think that when they hire my wife, like they're what they're trying to do is make order in their home. But mamish, I really think it's true. It makes order in their brain. It makes order in their heart. Because if you live in a space and it's a big Chochmah what she does, a big Chochmah. She mamish has this whole Chochmah. She looks at a space. She knows exactly, it's called functional usage, right? She's read all these books and all these different things. She knows how to use the space in a way that's neat, orderly, attractive to the eye, and with yeshivadas. So minimalism means even you'll have less, but not because like some people are forced to have less because they can't afford more. The people who could afford more are trying to have less. They're running in the opposite direction. You see, it's such a crazy world. It's a crazy world. Mar b'nechasim, mar b'daiga. You have more things, you want less things. You want less things, you want more things. It's crazy. But the bottom line, it's a mamash and olam hafach. So what do we all need? We all need emunah. We all need emunah. Let's finish up. Parnassah shebechinas smach zvula mitzeisecha. The person has proper parnassah, which brings joy, as opposed to be'itzavin techano bechinas. This is what it's called: matzah isha, matzah toiv. Ve'ein toiv ala tzaddik. And that word toiv is a reference to the tzaddik, who enables a person to live with this emunah consciousness, without whom you cannot have emunah on Hashem. Ve'aminu b'Hashem uva Moshe Avdei. The way that they got to emunah in Hashem is through Moshe Avdei. Tzaddik. When we believe in the tzaddik yichya, then you've attained or pnei melech chayim. Through the tzaddik. There's no other way. There's no other way. And it's not, again, in some metaphysical sense that people who weren't brought up with this terminology, find it very difficult to understand. What do you need the tzaddik for? It's tzaddik worship, chas v'shalom, all these things. The tzaddik is serving Hashem on your behalf. No, and no. No, the tzaddik is giving us guidance. The tzaddik is the guide who's helping us to discover the core critical elements that are necessary as almost a derech eretz that's kadma l'Torah. It's like the Torah is there and it's accessible for everyone, but you need to know what tools do you need in order to handle it. All right, that Facebook post that I wrote about the museum and the guide. You can have the whole museum, but if you're not guided, if someone isn't there to hold your hands, to walk you through, to give you the lens, many different mishalim, it's not going to happen. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in that way. By Aminu b'Hashem uva ma'ishavdei. Why couldn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu have just given the Torah to whole of Klal Yisrael? Why did there need to be what's called in the Rishonim a sarsur, an in-between? So much so that when we stand up, halachically, there have to be at least 3 people standing around the bima, right, by Kriyas HaTorah. Do you know this? One of them, the Bal Kaireh, is the aspect of Hashem. So brought in halacha this way. The one who's getting the aliyah is the Bechin of Klal Yisrael, receiving the Torah. And there needs to be a third person there who's Keneged Moshe. That's what it says. Because you cannot have Kabbalah Satorah without a Moshe. There has to be the figure of Moshe there. What's Moshe? This is this mysterious role of the tzaddik. Maybe the most important thing that the tzaddik is the one who reminds. Maybe that's what the tzaddik is. The one who reminds. Adayin. Aiden. Who reminds us of the Aiden that we have inside of us. Right? Who's Adayin. That's the job of the tzaddik. The Adayin Hanafashas. Right? This is what the tzaddik is. Because you can go through life and then you lose touch with some basic things that we all have as youth, because be'etzem we're all tzaddikim, tzaddikim. But sometimes, like a magnet, you need an external magnet to draw out all those inner pieces, and bring them out. And that's why we said at the end of yesterday's shir, the job of the tzaddik is not to focus on himself. The job of the tzaddik is to point to the tzaddik that you have and say, you came to me to find your treasure. Actually, I had a dream that there's a treasure buried in your backyard. Go home and find it. That's the job of the tzaddik. Let's just finish up. This is the bechina of toiv. Ve'ein toiv el tzaddik. That's matzah, isha matzah, toiv. You want goodness? You want to have isha toiv, which is Parnassah toiv, but not just good Parnassah that you make a lot of money, but good, that should be also, but good Parnassah that it feels good. It leaves us with a good feeling. We're b'yishav das with our Parnassah. We're doing Mazel matan be'emunah. The answer is tzaddik. Ve'ein toiv el tzaddik, hainu bris. You need the bris melach olam k'may shekasav imru tzaddik ki toiv. Say to the tzaddik, ki toiv, you are good. K'may shekasav atera oisai ki toivhu, when it says about Moshe Rabbeinu that they saw that he was toiv, say chazal shanoilin mahul. He was born mahul. What's mahul? It's bris. What's bris? Tzaddik. Tzaddik is soid oilam. The ein toiv, and toiv is also ar. Ein toiv ela ar. Right? That's why the Spalabayis Kula Oira, the whole house was full of light. Ar ki toiv. So all these things are connected. Toiv is ar, toiv is tzaddik, toiv is bris milah. This is the aspect of as tikvas chut hashani, that when you have the yesh tikva la'acharisech, when you have the bacha bakuk at the very, very end, ve'emidan al achas v'tzadik ve'emunasa yichya, and you salve emunah and you salve everything else, then you have ar. Because then you have all these elements. You have Parnassah toiva, matzah isha matzah toiv. That's the positive aspect of Parnassah. And what's that toiv? That toiv is the ar pnei melachayim, right? Bayar the kimasa ar ki toiv. That toiv is the Indian of course, the tzaddik, right? Imru tzaddik ki toiv. And ultimately, the tzaddik is enabling us to access the bechina of bris, because it says vayar oisai ki toivu, and that means that he was born mahul. That's the Indian of the milah. That's the Indian of uncovering the outer layer to reveal what's really going on beyond the surface, and to live in that state of authentic consciousness out of a deep place, so that we can then access the deeper strata of reality, and to live in a childlike way, with joy and with simcha, with life, with chias, with va'atam adveikim Hashem alekechem chayim kulcha miyayim ba'ar pnei melchayim. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Is that the story of the Tom is when he's eating the food, and it's like a hina of the mun. And man, we know, is from Torah Vav is das,
Avada.
and nun, bina,
Absolutely.
etc. And he that's
Tasting
it.
all the
Whatever
tastes.
is, whatever it is, it's all.
Biduk. It's a bechina also of Esther. That Esther, whoever looked at her, they saw that she looked like their nation. It's a bechina of the man. There's a bechina of and Esther started Vav. Esther is Emunah. Esther is the Shechina. Okay. Yeah, green because of what we learned, right? Kav Kodesh HaKodashim, and the Malchus that's unripe because it comes from the place of Bina.
ישמח לב עם מבקשי השם, ישמח לב עם מבקשי השם, ידרידי ראיו, ידרידי ראיו, ידרידי ראיו.